speak out. When your freedoms are all gone, when people are getting hurt like they are in the US, in Australia, in countries around the world, police officers have flatly stated that the RCMP is really corrupt and mentioned that there is a cover-up in Nova Scotia murders. There is no reasonable information and they are not telling us what they know. I will lose my certification if I speak out. If you are not on the same page as management, they will punish you. They can make your life so miserable you just want to quit. A lot of us are on board. It would be a career-ending move by speaking out. It is your duty, not just as police officers, but as Canadian citizens, to guard and protect your people, your communities, and our entire society. However, you are needed and respectfully requested and respectfully demanded to investigate fully the following information. In effect, this is a notice of demand to investigate the Premier and Lieutenant Governor of Ontario for criminal code violations, including a hoax, which is a violation of Section 83 of the Criminal Code of Canada, which falls under domestic terrorism. On the first page that follows, please take note of the names of police officers who have been approached in some manner, and let it be known that they showed some form of contempt for this information. The duties of the police are to safeguard fundamental rights and freedoms as well as the Human Rights Code via the Police Services Act. Violations needing protection, small list here, are domestic terrorism, hoax regarding terrorism, the right to gaining of a livelihood, torture, abuse due to lockdowns that violate Section 7 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act, not demonstratively justifying the original declaration of emergency, was sworn under oath otherwise information, not protecting the population from breathing in CO2, toxic substance, isolation, and suicides. Over 30 institutions and offices around the world have been queried through Freedom of Information requests for records containing proof that the alleged SARS-CoV-2 virus in fact exists. The responses have yielded in total no records. Ontario public health officials have zero legitimate evidence to support their story of a COVID-19 virus, let alone a COVID-19 pandemic. The virus is unproven and purely theoretical. They have committed fraud on the population. Currently, there is no declared emergency. Terminated July 24th, 2020. The information is as follows. Can I have some? It's going to take about an hour to go through this.
When he called me just now, he told me he's not allowed to come outside.
Oh, now he's not allowed to come out.
This document will be served to police physically by me in person. My name is Kellyanne Wolf. Today, to the holder of this document and to everyone in Ontario, and to Toronto Police Officer Eugene Poplinski of Division 22, badge number 10778, to PC Telesnik, badge number 5977 of Division 53, to PC Snyder, badge number 10644, Division 53, to PC Belakorek, badge number 99798, Division 51. I would like to bring to your attention violations of the Criminal Code, sections 21, 83.01, bracket 1, bracket B, 83.231, bracket 1, 122, 126, 128, 176, 180, 218, 219, 245, 269, 269.1, 346, 361, 380, 423, 429, and 430. That is quite a lot of crimes, people.
Crimes against humanity
Please
from our
ensure
government.
every police officer in Ontario gets this document. Well, folks, we're going to make sure that every police officer in Canada gets this document. The names of the accused are as follows. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, date of birth November 20th, 1964. Ontario Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dowdesdale, date of birth November 9th, 1944. Addresses of accused. Accused are employed in Toronto, Ontario, with offices at Queen's Park, located at 111 Wellesley Street West, M7A 1A1. The phone number of Premier Doug Ford is 416 325-1941. The phone number of Lieutenant
They should
Governor
be out here
Elizabeth
right now
Dowdesdale
listening like they did in
is
Hamilton, but they're not.
416-325-7780. Numerous criminal code violations were committed by Ontario Premier Doug Ford and the Ontario Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dowdesdale. The offenses were committed at Queen's Park. The offenses were committed on March 17th, 2020 and March 30th, 2020, and all other days that the non-demonstratively justified orders were in place. By failing to obey the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code, failing to obey Section 7.0.2, Bracket 3 of the Emergency Act. The declaration of emergency was part of a United Nations and World Health Organization system-wide training and stimulation exercise of a deliberate release of the lethal respiratory pathogen. See documentation included within. The actions are an inhumane act on a civilian population. Page 18 verifies this. Page 17 shows it was planned before September 2019, and page 19 shows only one death in Canada as of March 20th, 2020. This is not a pandemic.
Nope.
Over 30 institutions and offices around the world have been queried through Freedom of Information requests for records containing proof that alleged SARS-CoV-2 virus in fact exists. The responses have yielded in total no records. Ontario public health officials have zero legitimate evidence to support their story of a COVID-19 virus, let alone a COVID-19 pandemic. The virus is unproven and purely theatrical. They have committed fraud on the population. Particulars of offense are as follows. March 17th, 2020 and March 30th, 2020. The location was Queen's Park. The offense is alleged: reckless endangerment of children, child abuse, elder abuse, healthy people abuse, inhumane acts on civilian populations, bodily harm, failing to obey a statute, torture, domestic terrorism, and a hoax regarding terrorism. Section 21, can you hold it for my hand's freezing? Sorry. That'd be great, yeah. Section 21, party to offense. The accused did unlawfully commit numerous offenses, in particular violating Section 126 of the Criminal Code, disobeying a statute. The statute violated was Section 7.0.2, Bracket 1 and Bracket 3 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act. Emergency measures were not in accordance with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The measures violated Section 1 of the Charter, as there was never any sworn, under oath, demonstratively justified evidence or reasoning for an emergency declaration.
Nope.
The measures violated virtually every aspect of Section 2 of the Charter, in particular one's ability to have an alternative opinion and or belief due to overwhelming fear-mongering and false facts regarding how hospitals and test centers were overloaded. Freedoms affected were freedom of peace of assembly, freedom of association. The measures isolated virtually everyone in Ontario. A very significant right of the gaining of a livelihood was violated on a large scale. This happened because there was a $600 million bailout paid to our media by the federal government, and that money came through by foreign interference via the International Monetary Fund. Section 83.01, Bracket 1, Bracket B, and Section 83.231, Bracket 1, domestic terrorism. This is a hoax regarding terrorism. The accused did cause public intimidation with regard to its security, including economic security, causing persons to do or refrain from doing any act such as freedom of assembly, freedom of the right to the gaining of a livelihood, freedom to not breathe in one's own carbon dioxide, among other things. This recklessly endangered the lives of children, elderly, the vulnerable, and the healthy segment of the population. The accused also caused serious disruption and interference of essential services. Every Canadian is essential. Every job is essential. Every child's education is absolutely essential. This is unacceptable.
There's like 24.
The accused never supplied sworn records or sworn proof of the criteria and circumstances for a declaration of emergency, and never disclosed which resources or which circumstances existed in Section 7.0.1, Bracket 3.2. It is deemed to be a hoax without such sworn, under oath, demonstratively justified proof required by Section 1 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They acted with intention and wanton and reckless disregard for the lives of the population, causing severe hardships, reckless child endangerment, and suicides. The amount of domestic assaults, child abuse,
Yes, forward and Lieutenant
and
Governor.
drug abuse that has gone up since the beginning of this hoax is absolutely unacceptable. The report on the 129th day of the declaration of emergency did not divulge the criteria and circumstances for the declaration of emergency, nor was it ever divulged under oath to the population at any other point. It can be easily said that the resources in question in section 7.0.1 bracket 3(2) were staples of paper clips. The accused failed to disclose sworn records containing proof that the alleged SARS-CoV-2 virus in fact exists. Deaths are included, whether or not COVID-19 was determined to be a contributing or underlying cause of death, as indicated in the IPHIS field type of death. Source is included within this document. There is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases. Dr. Fauci said during a speech at Georgetown University, July 2017, adding, "The thing we're extraordinarily confident about is that we're going to see it in the next few years." One example of a very significant essential service that was seriously disrupted and interfered with is access to a justice of the peace by any member of the population. This interfered with its access to a justice of the peace. This has happened with the JP office is closed or was closed to the population for over a month. In Canada, we are supposed to be the people who call the shots. And the police are obligated by their oath to protect that. The Constitution guarantees that. Our Constitution is being infringed upon. This is an act of domestic terrorism. Section 126, disobeying a statute. The accused disobeyed section 7.0.2 bracket 1 and bracket 3 bracket 1 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act, violating the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The accused disobeyed the Constitution Act of 1982, in particular sections 52, 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 15, 26, and 31. Accused obstructed religious, moral purpose gatherings and gaining of a livelihood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry guys, it's cold. The weather doesn't stop you from fighting for your freedoms. Section 128, misconduct. There are numerous reports in a variety of mediums that coroners are involved with fraudulent death certificates labeling COVID for deaths completely unrelated, to the death, or if there were comorbidities. Accused neglected to demonstratively justify with proven sworn under oath evidence. Media reports cannot be used because many reports have been shown to be false by independent citizen journalists. Deaths were labeled COVID-19 for even gunshot deaths and suicide. Accused did not protect and were party in some form for autopsies to no longer be performed. Autopsies are not being performed. So if I get murdered, they're going to call it COVID, and you will never find my murderer. Just so you understand. That is a serious violation. The accused did not protect and were party in some form for autopsies no longer being performed, never being able to prove nor verify cases. The so-called virus was never isolated or purified, and to extend on that, for information regarding the original repository report released from the science team that made headlines, and those headlines declared that they had isolated the virus, these headlines made headlines all around the world, were false. You can visit www.freedomforumcanada.com/background, and all the evidence is there, including the original repository report, on which lines 210 to 216, those scientists declared in writing that this virus has no effect on, nor can replicate on, healthy immune tissue. And in layman's terms, that means that asymptomatic people are healthy people and are not a threat of passing this virus. The government received this document on April 12th. Section 218, the accused, through failing to act to safeguard and protect, did recklessly endanger the lives of children. Masks and social distancing damaged children. Actually, almost everyone. Children have become docile on school buses and within schools. Carbon dioxide trapped within a mask will do this. Carbon dioxide causes active rats, rodents, and animals to slow down, then lie down, and then die. CO2 is listed as a toxic substance. Item number 74 of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, 1999. Oxygen deprivation occurs as the mask becomes a CO2 retention chamber. Children are berated by other children for not wearing a mask, even while exempt. Section 219, the accused did neglect and wantonly and recklessly neglected to hear or receive any voices or messages from the population that particular emergency measures and measures in general were harmful to the overall population. Children, elderly workers, non-workers, etc. COVID-19 measures were not demonstrably justified. It is absolutely outrageous, the censorship that is happening to our country. The freedom of speech is a necessity to our evolution and to any democracy and any civilized society. No matter the content, no matter how offensive, no matter how much it might hurt you, freedom of speech is absolutely necessary. If you don't allow somebody to be reckless, rude, or even attack you with words, then you don't know who a threat is. You don't know who wants to blow you up. Freedom of speech is necessary. Freedom of speech is essential. Section 245, the population was forced to wear face masks, forcing the population to breathe in a noxious toxic substance. CO2 is listed as a toxic substance. Once again, item number 274 of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. It is outrageous that our law enforcement promoted one side of the law to the public and failed to inform the businesses and the public at large of the exemptions within the mandatory mask mandates. There are exemptions, and exemptions do not have to be explained. There is no store that is protected from these exemptions. You cannot discriminate against a person who is in a wheelchair in the same way you cannot discriminate against a person who does not wear a mask. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Amen.
Section 219, the accused did neglect and wantonly and recklessly neglected to hear, sorry, I just read that one, guys. Section 245, the population, I did that one too, sorry. Moving on, Section 346, extortion. Extortion was committed on the population by the non-demonstrably justified measures. Section 361, false pretense. The accused misrepresented fact-based evidence, including the number of cases, the unreliable PCR test, caseload of hospitals, which are known to be nearly empty. There is less than one person in intensive care per hospital in Ontario.
Yep.
Thank you to our Canadian citizens for having their own due diligence, for going to these hospitals and providing the public with the information that the mainstream media should be providing them with. I have personally gone to Trillium Hospital and to Credit Valley Hospital and to William Osler Hospital and seen with my own eyes and provided the evidence on social media at large that these hospitals are empty. I have done this on the day of and the day after that the mayors of Mississauga and the mayors of Brampton lied to the public, claiming that they were so overwhelmed their triage had to move to the parking lot. This was a blatant lie. These people are incompetent to be in their positions. They should not only be fired, but they have committed public perjury, which comes with a 10-year sentence, and we want it enforced.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I will say this. The GPMB put out a document with a copyright date of 2019, with a release date of September 2019, telling of a United Nations and World Health Organization planned simulation and training exercise for the release of a lethal respiratory pathogen by September 2020. CGPMB portions of document below, all included in the package. Progress indicators for September 2020. The United Nations, including World Health Organization, conducts at least 2 system-wide training and simulation exercises, including one for covering the deliberate release of a lethal respiratory pathogen. The emergency orders, can you hold this? The emergency orders did not accompany any definitive, demonstrably justified information per the Act to prevent, reduce, or mitigate a danger of the major proportions that was sworn under oath and easily verified, violating the most fundamental laws, violating fundamental justice. On March 17th, 2020, according to the Government of Canada website showing history to that point, there was only one case and one death. This is not a pandemic. The accused follow a path without real justification and cause serious harm in virtually all areas of life. The accused caused far greater collateral damage and serious harm than the benefits from the emergency measures. There was no emergency that required a declaration of emergency. There was no situation or impending situation that constituted a danger of major proportion. However, there is one
Yes, they
now
are, Chris.
because of these emergency measures.
All of them.
The accused recklessly endangered the lives of a significant portion of the population. The accused did create
There's all
a danger
kinds
of
of
major
proof,
proportion with the unjustified
documents.
declaration of emergency. And that is a
With it,
violation of
you just
Section
can't-
83
it's not read
of the
them out,
Criminal Code of
obviously.
Canada, and
You can see
also because of the Prime Minister, a violation of Section 46, which is treason. There is never or nearly never any discussion of a healthy lifestyle such as natural food diet, etc. Almost nothing from officials or to strengthen the population. Severe panic was created. We're going to change that.
There was never
Because
any critical
Canadians
risk
know this is
assessment
nonsense,
done
and they
for
are sick of
lockdowns.
having their rights and their lives and their livelihood and their security infringed upon. We're going to start opening massive businesses, and we're going to open so many of them that you guys will not have the manpower to shut us down.
Yes.
Next section, torture on civilian population. Using the power and control wheel, Biderman's chart of coercion and Amnesty International report on torture to demonstrate abuse by our government and the failure of law enforcement agencies. Power and control wheel. The power and control wheel is a visual tool that is useful in understanding how
Trolls are so
tactics
funny.
of abuse are used by abusers to gain and
Like, don't
maintain
you have anything
power and
better to do
control
with your
over their
day than
victims.
come on here when you don't actually
Biderman's
like
chart
what
of
you're
coercion is a tool
hearing?
designed to demonstrate and explain the coercive methods
way.
of stress manipulation used to torture prisoners of war. The United Nations Convention Against Torture defines torture as the intentional infliction of severe physical or mental pain or suffering for purposes such as obtaining information or a confession or punishing, intimidating, or coercing someone. Torture is always illegal. No exceptional circumstances whatsoever, whether a state of war or threat of war, internal political instability, or any other public emergency may be invoked as a justification of torture. That means you cannot torture people. The purpose of this document is to demonstrate how we are being abused, coerced, and tortured by officials at all levels of government, federally, provincially, and municipally, and how our law enforcement agencies are failing to protect its citizens, therefore committing misconduct and participating in domestic terrorism.
I'm glad you think it's funny that
Using the
there's
power and control wheel
a
attached,
major
it is quite
increase in
evident,
suicides,
that the
elderly
government,
dying alone in
with its
homes.
overreaching
Glad
emergency
whoever this
measures,
troll
is
is
acting,
laughing thinks that's
is
really
actually
funny.
exhibiting power and control,
And
and in
people are
doing
losing
so is in
their
fact
businesses and
abusing
their
its
entire
citizens.
livelihoods
In March, it
based
was
on
determined by the powers that be that we
unconstitutional
need to isolate and self-quarantine for 14 to 15 days to flatten the curve, to ensure that our health facilities did not get overwhelmed. This included the lockdown, where the majority of businesses and offices had to close down. No one could visit anyone, and we had to adhere to strict social distancing procedures. We could go to few select essential businesses, such as grocery stores, namely Walmart, Costco, and other large corporations, as long as we sanitized our hands, stood on circles, and followed arrows. Small businesses were shuttered, and none of us could get a haircut. Even our places of worship, where one could find some comfort, were closed. It is now over 6
Gyms.
months, and while things have begun to relax, and it's now been almost a year.
Yeah,
Sorry, we
10
have to
months.
update, yeah.
10 months.
You gotta update that one, bud. Things are back to a lockdown. There is still stringent restrictions, which are now at risk of returning to the early days of the lockdown, and maybe the wheel will be addressed to demonstrate how we are being abused. From the beginning, we were told to isolate at home and have no contact with anyone that did not live with us. We not only had to maintain 6-foot social distancing, but visiting or driving in the same car were verboten. Even now, we can do this, but only if it is with our social circle of at least 10 people. So we're supposed to choose 10 people by government order that we can talk to. am a grown woman. I am a grown Canadian woman in a free and democratic society. I will not be dictated to, thank you very much. Our support systems have been decimated. Elderly people and palliative patients are dying alone. This is disgusting. This is beyond abuse. It is cruel. It is heartless. This falls under controlling what someone does and limiting outside involvement. No one can get close enough to witness if there is abuse or neglect, or if people are mentally or emotionally stable. There is a reason, make no mistake, why they are separating our elderly from the rest of our population. Because our elderly have seen this method before, and they can communicate that they have seen this method before to the young.
Yep, psychological.
And in order to make
warfare.
sure that the young stay indoctrinated by this absolutely unlawful, illegal, and totalitarian agenda, they need to make sure that they stay in ignorance.
Yep.
Of course, controlling where someone goes falls under this category as well. At the beginning, we were not allowed to go to parks, travel out of town, or out of province. We are still
I know. I don't know who it is. I can't
not
tell
allowed
who it is, Kyle.
to travel to the
Hilarious.
U.S. as the border is now
Like, they're
closed. Interestingly,
so
what they
obsessed with
what they
spending
read,
their
watch, or
30
listen to
minutes
is also a
of their
huge
day
issue with
trolling
extreme
the
censorship,
speech.
silencing any voices that contradict or challenge the World Health Organization, the CDC, or public health.
Leftists are the biggest bullies.
In the future, it seems that there will be isolation facilities or concentration camps. And it is reported that there may be some secret non-voluntary isolation centers in Quebec, of which people have been forcibly taken from the streets for something as simple as sneezing. This is outrageous. That is kidnapping. In the future, we know that Trudeau has given the Premier money for an isolation facility in Toronto. While searching for information on the topic of isolation, the following information was discovered. California civil rights attorney Lee Dundas published a video on Facebook last week to show the devastating consequences of isolating children and forcing them to practice social distancing at places like school. I want to clarify something separate from this package. The root cause of all of the problems in our society today begins with psycholinguistic manipulation. Words are the most important part of every civilized society because it's the words that we use that define the laws that keep the peace amongst a vast array of different people. Words define law. There is a massive difference between social distancing
Lynn,
and
for all the
physical
hearts.
distancing.
Yeah,
You
guys,
social
love it
distance
with
from somebody
hearts.
who has gossiped about you. You physical distance from somebody who is clearly sick in order to protect your health. These words are being used intentionally. And they have been, and I'll give an example. The Prime Minister of Canada has often looked for support from the public for what he stated was foreign fighters. To Canadians, it seems that he's talking about a faction of the Canadian military. Who wouldn't support the military? Of course we will. But what if I told you he's not? He
Yeah.
was talking about ISIS.
Yep.
That is psycholinguistic manipulation. This is why it is very important for Canadians to learn the words that they use in courtrooms and not just the words they use in a Webster's dictionary. Carrying on. Preventing someone from working. With the closure of offices, schools, and small businesses, economic issues have affected a large percentage of citizens. Businesses and offices closing have caused economic hardship in terms of revenue, as well as employees being laid off or losing their jobs. The fact that they're now homeschooling their children. Daycare centers were also closed, and with self-isolation models, it was nearly impossible to access childcare services. With all the loss of income, people had no choice but to apply for CERB and other benefits from the government, basically welfare,
Hush money.
making them ask for money and
Handouts.
giving them an allowance. It is very interesting that the government employees federally, provincially, and municipally have continued to get their paycheck even though they've been working reduced hours from home. Some doctors are able to continue receiving a paycheck even though they do not have to physically see any patients or perform any physical examinations. Teachers have continued to be paid. No economic hardship, it seems. One wonders if those that have not lost economically are the ones filling out the surveys in favor of more restrictions. We have tent cities popping up at an accelerated rate across Canada like never ever before seen. These tent cities don't consist of just adults. There are children and babies living in tents across Canada in a Canadian winter because of the neglect and abuse of a failed government. One statement that is repeated regularly is basically, if you do not comply, you could kill grandma. But it is an empty threat. They are killing countless elderly folk by isolating them. Most elderly are very lonely to begin with. Let me make this very clear. On May 5th of 2020, myself, Vlad Sobolev, the founder of Hugs Over Masks, and Chris Sky, the founder of Mothers Against Distancing, we met with Dr. Sakdev Sidhu, who is the lead professor at the Donnelly Center at the University of Toronto of Biomolecular Engineering. He informed us, like he informed the population in the Toronto Star on May 5th, that he supplied this government with a, quote, cure for all symptoms of coronavirus. A coronavirus could be anything from a sniffles to a flu. The government threw that, quote, cure on the back burner in favor of a $300 million deal with pharmaceutical companies that are responsible for the death, paralyzation, and retardation of over 500,000 children in India and Africa. These companies have no liability. These are the same companies that they are using to mandate vaccines on Canadians. Let me also make it clear and for the record that we are not anti-mask, as the narrative would have you believe. We don't care if you wear a mask or a tutu. We are not anti-vax, we are anti-poison.
Pro-choice.
Should they be unfortunate enough to contact COVID-19, apparently numerous DNR orders were issued without permission of the patient or family. As well, the loneliness and isolation are driving a number of elderly people to seek MAID, medical assistance in dying. As you can see, isolation is a bigger threat than the disease itself. Suicide numbers are absolutely unbelievable across not just Canada, but worldwide. In North America alone, over 820 children under the age of 15 years old have killed themselves in the last 10 months. Why isn't this on mainstream media? The youngest girl was 8 years old in Edmonton. She wrote, "Mommy, I'm sorry. I don't want to be alone anymore." And then she took a hairdryer into her bathtub. This is unacceptable.
CTV's here.
It is intimidating to go to shops and services and be greeted with someone policing the entrances. Do you have a mask? For some reason, many of these people are very militant and disrespectful.
Ontario
It is quite
hasn't
stressful to go
followed yet,
anywhere,
but they
especially
are
if one does
going
not
to.
know the routine for that particular establishment or are ignorant of their rights and the difference between a right and a privilege. To be talked down to and threatened by everyone as if they are diseased and contaminated. The blame lies with the media and the health and government officials who have conditioned the masses to view everyone as a danger to them. The government and the media is responsible for public unrest. That is an act of domestic terrorism. They are commissioned with these responsibilities to ensure the public is kept peaceful and happy and informed. They have violated all of that. There is no purpose for them. They need to go.
Yep.
Playing mind games. What comes to mind is 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then another time interval was suggested, and another. What is it with this disease or this virus? It seems to have a calendar, a tape measure. It seems to be psychic. It seems to be selective,
light or
and
dark.
it only exists within, small businesses and somewhere in the middle class. It's ridiculous. Teenagers are largely unaffected by COVID. Mr. Ford referred to their elderly relatives and that the teens were not considering them, trying to make them feel bad about themselves. You know what I want to say, right? For sure, we're being treated like children. Decisions are being made for our own good. Nobody asked us how we wanted to handle this crisis. And what should have been done, and I am a simple Canadian woman, a citizen like everyone else. I could have came up with 10 different options to deal with this, and I know that everybody else, you should have opened, and let me just make it clear, here's the solution. You should have opened immune testing and research facilities that came with accommodation for the vulnerable.
Yep.
Then there would be no effect to our economy. It's a pretty simple thing to think of. Are you telling me that our government is
But
so
we know it's all
incompetent
about the
that they
world
couldn't
reset.
have thought
They
of a
wanna
simple
crash the
solution like
economy.
that? Our lives are being dictated to by unelected health officials and elected officials who are answering to the unelected United Nations
there's
and World
another
Health
troll.
Organization.
Bye, Alicia.
I'm sorry, but I never consented to being governed by the United Nations, and I never consented to being governed by the World Health Organization. And it's only a matter of time before every Canadian goes to the Supreme Court of Canada and revokes their consent to be governed by this government itself. What are you going to do then? Because we're getting there. For this section,
go
the
away.
reader is referred to Amazing
Go read a
Polly's
book.
YouTube video.
Go educate yourself.
In the video
Really, you
is
need
this
it.
torture. Amazing Polly submits evidence and examples of comparing our situation to the study of torture and coercion on prisoners of war. It becomes clear that what we are being put through with the virus response is a near perfect parallel to the Amnesty International definition of torture. As a reminder, the United Nations Convention Against Torture defines torture as the intentional infliction of severe physical or mental pain or suffering for purposes such as obtaining information or confession or punishing, intimidating, or coercing someone. Torture is always illegal. No exceptional circumstances whatsoever,
Pretty sure
whether a
you're
state
the
of
troll
war or a
here.
threat of war, internal political instability, or any other public emergency may be invoked as a justification for torture. Yep. Yep.
I can't block her from here. I don't think, anyways. Maybe.
Every element has been satisfied. Isolation deprives victims of all social support of their ability to resist, develops an intense
Actually, I think
concern
there's
with
like
self.
25.
This
That's
could be
nice.
home environment,
Which is
makes
not
the
bad
victim
considering
dependent.
it's winter and we just decided to
Monopolization
do
of
this 2 days
perception
ago.
fixes attention upon immediate predicament, eliminates information not in compliance with demands, punishes independence and any resistance. Humiliation and degradation makes resistance more costly than compliance. Animal level concerns. It is disgusting to watch anybody, whether it be our elderly, a regular citizen who is in perfect health, or those with autism, which we have seen numerous times, being assaulted because of a government narrative that has been put forth on society. Exhaustion weakens mental and physical ability to resist. Threats creates anxiety and despair, outlines cost of non-compliance. The police are commissioned and obligated by oath to protect and serve the public, not threaten or intimidate them. We have been seeing acts of brutality, harassment, and assault done on innocent civilians by our members of law enforcement across the entire country. Make no mistake, this method is not new. There is an absolute intention to turn our police into
Yeah,
criminals.
we're at Maple Grove.
Our
We're
police,
hoping the
I'm
speakers
speaking
reach
to
them.
you.
We're handing them the package.
You
In
became police
Hamilton,
officers
a whole
out
bunch
of your
them
own
actually came out
individual
and listened,
morality.
which was awesome.
You have pledged your lives for citizens in your communities because you love them. I am asking you now not to abandon your orders, but to respect your own dignity and due diligence and morality. Respect your own humanity. There are police across the entire country who are finally standing on the side of the citizens. And I encourage everyone to visit Police on Guard for Thee. We're up to 9,000 members of active duty and retired police officers across this country. And these are the men that we need to support. These are the men and women that deserve the resources, all the resources, because they have the integrity and those oaths that they swore they completely
You guys should get
comprehend.
yourself one of these
And I stand with them as well.
truthers.
Occasional indulgences. Positive motivation for compliance hinders adjustment to deprivation. Demonstrating omnipotence suggests futility of resistance. Forcing trivial demands develops habits of compliance.
I didn't even know.
Wave to you.
Oh, when you have sunglasses on, I'm like, and so did I. How's it going? Yeah, you too.
We've already taken
I'm like,
Moving forward, having argued and demonstrated using the various tools that we are in fact being tortured by all levels of our government, it is now imperative that we call on law enforcement to investigate the criminal behavior of the Ontario government as well as local municipalities. All the lockdown measures and mask mandates must be rescinded immediately, and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Ontario Human Rights Code must be honored. The state of emergency ended at the end of July. The order was revoked July 24th, 2020. The termination date of the emergency was July 29th, 2020.
Yeah, we have a
However,
bunch of
the
lawyers.
government has retained all extreme and extraordinary measures
There's a bunch
as if
of
it
pro bono
was still
lawyers that
in a
are
state of
also helping
emergency.
businesses
In addition,
get
according to
opened back up,
Randy
too.
Hillier, MPP, Premier Doug Ford will not reveal who is a part of the COVID command. The agenda, minutes, or communications are hidden. And this unelected and unaccountable team is allowed to come up with all kinds of outrageous edicts without debate, discussion, or vote. According to documentation on the website standupcanada.solutions, declarations of emergency in every province failed to meet criteria and
She's not
are
a
in
lawyer. Shut
violation
the
of the
fuck
Emergency
up,
Management
Alicia.
and Civil
Seriously,
Protections
go
Act.
away.
I encourage encourage every Canadian to visit standupcanada.solutions. These women are absolutely phenomenal. They are exceptionally intelligent, and they have defined these acts with
Do you guys
grandeur.
recognize that a bunch of our
It is
public health
apparent that
officials
this
that are
virus is a part of a
unelected
global plan
public
with a
health
much bigger
officials
agenda.
are actually
It is
just
obvious
people
that
like
the majority of governments
psychiatrists
are
and
in lockstep
lawyers?
with each other.
And
For
they're the ones
information on
that
this
literally are
pandemic,
calling the shots.
please
Doug
view
Ford
the
has given
pandemic
public health
documentaries.
full
You can get them on
authority
BitChute
to
or
do everything they're
pandemicseries.com.
doing.
It is extremely disturbing to view parts of the world that are essentially in a police state. If this lockstep tyranny progresses as
You
it
guys should
appears to
also
be,
go look
then it will
out
not be long
Police
before we
Stand
find
on
ourselves in a
Guard
police state in Canada.
For the, I believe it's
Quebec
called.
is already
We have a
taking
whole
measures that
bunch
indicate it is
of
headed towards a
retired
police state,
and
and I will declare right
active
now
OPP,
that I am so
RCMP,
proud of our French
and
Canadians.
police
I stood
standing
with
up
them
with
in
us
front of
because they
50,000
are
people.
just
I've marched with
astonished
them
and
as they
disgusted
stand up
at the police
in
state we're
passion,
turning
in
into.
love for this country, and as an example to the rest of Canadians across this country against this tyranny. And I will stand with them no matter what, and I encourage you to never back down. The following text is part of a legal document that is ready to be submitted to the courts. Top officials like the Queen, presidents, or prime ministers, no one has proof that a coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 causes COVID-19.
Nope, they
Proof
don't.
requires the gold standard
I'll
of
share all that
medical testing
information
called
below,
Koch's
actually.
postulates that isolate a suspected disease-causing agent. Freedom of information responses confirm
Yeah, I did hear
that there is
that.
no record of isolating coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 anywhere.
Next step is a
Anywhere
24/7
in 100
protest,
countries.
never ending until this bullshit ends.
Instead, there is an abstract,
We're
digitally
too
created
complacent in
database
Canada.
virus. This is the
Shut
age
the
of
fuck up,
speculation
Alicia.
and
Go away.
hypocrisy.
Seriously, get off my page.
The coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 test can only test for a sequence of RNA,
There's no
not a
fucking
virus.
virus. Grow
CDC reported 9,200 people died in Canada with COVID-19. 9,200 out of 38 million equals 0.00024% or less than 1/4 comparable to a regular flu season. And once again, this government has had a cure for all symptoms of coronavirus
Yes, they have.
given to them by the University of Toronto on May 5th. How many Canadians died that did not have to die? That is genocide.
Yep. Go look in India. They have a $2
Without proof of
solution
COVID-19 or a
package.
reliable test, a regular flu season, death rate, and unmet emergency conditions, COVID-19 measures are not demonstratively justified. This means top officials acted privately, outside statutory authority, and are privately liable, and we will hold them accountable. As well, no actions by any lieutenant governor, premier, governor, attorney general, solicitor general, top health official, mayor, health department, chief of police, etc. were demonstratively justified. Actions were all fear-based without fact-based evidence, illegal, unlawful, and nothing was sworn under oath. From the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act, Section 7.0.2(1) states, the purpose of making orders under this section is to promote the public good by protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the people of Ontario in times of declared emergencies in a manner that is subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. Once again, in a manner that is subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Officers, you have the ability to change all of this. Your duty is to uphold the Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This document verifies without doubt that there has been violations to our constitutional and Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is your duty to arrest these criminals. And we stand before you as the public
It's your duty
today
to safeguard.
in demand that you honor your oath. And if you do not, you will be held accountable
It has
as
to be.
well.
It sucks because it's winter, but we have to go 24/7.
From the Constitution Act 1982, Part 1, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 52 states, bracket 1, the Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of Canada, and any law that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution is, to the extent of the inconsistency, of no force or effect. To regular Canadians who do not understand this language, this means that none of these measures are lawful. Not the quarantine, not the lockdown, not the mandatory masks. They are lying to you. You do not have to abide
Thank you.
by these. They need
I'm
you
just
to
gonna block her
voluntarily
and delete all her
submit to
comments
them.
once I'm off here.
Further, Sections 1 and then 2 of the Constitution Act 1982, Section 1. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in its subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. You see what the problem is here? Is that regular Canadians think that the people that they elect are the government in Canada, and they are not. You need to understand the structure. This is a monarchy.
Yeah, we're
The people you elect
brainwashing
have typically been
people.
lawyers because their job is to mitigate between the Privy Council or the Crown.
Says the troll with
and
the
the
severe
people.
cognitive dissonance, brainwashed
It
by the
is
mainstream
time
media and corrupt
the
politicians.
Canadians start learning the structure of this government so that we can start putting forth effective change. It is time for Canada to become a republic. Section 6, bracket 2, every citizen of Canada and every person who has the status of a permanent resident of Canada has the right to pursue the gaining of a livelihood in any province. Section 9, everyone has the right not to be arbitrarily detained or imprisoned, not even in your own home. Section 12, everyone has the right not to be subjected to any cruel and unusual treatment or punishment,
Never mind, now I
like
can
treating
block
healthy
her.
people guilty of being sick, guilty until proven innocent. Section 26, the guarantee in this charter of certain rights and freedoms shall not be construed as denying the existence of any other rights or freedoms that exist in Canada, like being born free. Section 31, nothing in this charter extends the legislative powers of any body or authority, like the
Oh,
establishment operator's mask,
That's all been available for quite some time.
arbitrarily creating his or her
and
own laws
actually
through the
across the
legislation they
world,
created in
deaths
their
are
head
down.
right there and then. Regarding the
I have
right
a full
to the
chart.
gaining of a
I'll give it to
livelihood,
you.
how many Canadians have lost income? How many Canadians have lost their livelihood, their financial security, their business? How many Canadians lost a loved one to suicide because of the measures that did not fall within the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? The Police Services Act reads as follows. Section 1. Police services shall be provided throughout Ontario in accordance with the following principles. Subsection
it's
2,
about
the
the
importance
same
of
in some
safeguarding the
areas and
fundamental
lower
rights
in others.
guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code. This is your duty, officers. This is what you swore an oath to, and because of that, you are bound by law.
Safeguard the people.
Criminal
Safeguard
law.
our charter.
I have always stood beside our officers. So has everybody who marches with us, supports our organizations, and stands against these tyrannical measures. Officers, it is time for you to realize that we are your brothers, your sisters, your mothers, your fathers, your children, your grandchildren, and your friends. You will not face any sort of discrimination, loss of job, income, if you stand with your people. And we need you. We would like to bring your attention to a Supreme Court of Canada case. Ron Corelli versus Duplessis in 1959. It was a landmark constitutional
I have a
decision of the
feeling that'll
Supreme Court
happen
of
to
Canada
us
where the
too.
court held
They're
that
supposed to go
Maurice
back next
Duplessis,
Monday.
the
I
Premier
pulled
of
my
Quebec,
kids from the
had
school
overstepped his
program. I
authority
will
by
not put
revoking
my
the
kids
liquor
in the
license of a Jehovah's
indoctrinated
Witness.
school system
Justice
anymore.
Ivan Rand wrote in his often quoted reasons that the unwritten constitutional principle of the rule of law meant no public official was above the law and so could neither suspend nor dispense it. Briefly, this ruling also gives remedy for the population to hold police privately liable for acting outside of statutory authority. Each police officer was duty-bound to safeguard our freedoms, yet did not. Each police officer committed Section 80 and 81 violations under misconduct. Each police officer disobeyed Sections 1, Section 80, and Section 81 of the Police Services Act, and they failed to obey the Constitution Act of 1982. The Criminal Code, Section 126, is as follows. Disobeying a statute. Section 126 Bracket 1, every person who, without lawful excuse, contravenes an act of Parliament by intentionally doing anything that it forbids or by intentionally omitting to do anything that it requires to be done is, unless a punishment is expressly provided by law, guilty of bracket A, an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term of not more than 2 years. Officers, do you want to go to jail? Do you know what happens when cops go to jail? It's just, this is absurd. How about making people breathe in their own carbon dioxide, which is listed as a toxic substance? Once again, item number 74 of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. The police should have been laying charges on anyone forcing the mask wearing as follows. Section 245 of the Criminal Code. Every person who administers or causes to be administered to any other person,
the crowd before everyone gets there, and then
or causes any other person to take poison or any other destructive or noxious thing is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term of not more than 14 years. The police, by failing to do their duties, acted outside of statutory authority and created an emergency. Emergency means a situation or an impending situation that constitutes a danger of major proportions that could result in serious harm to persons or substantial damage to property. And that is caused by the forces of nature, a disease, or other health risk. An accident or an act were intentional or otherwise. Each police officer committed misconduct and committed criminal code offenses by failing to safeguard the fundamental rights and freedoms of the Human Rights Code. If you are a police officer and want to be seen as an honest police officer from this point on, the principle of the rule of law meant no public official was above the law and so could neither suspend nor dispense the law. Also, Section 15 of the Charter states that there is equality of the law and equal benefit of the law. Honest police officers, you have the duty to detain, question, and even arrest your fellow and superior officers. If you don't, people will hold you privately liable, and the economic damages in North America is likely in the trillions of dollars. Billions for sure, in Canada. There are people who are ready to hold you privately liable, and even citizens who are ready to arrest you personally.
I don't know, Tamara. Why don't you go somewhere else?
Make no
Why are you
mistake.
even here?
When the police do not serve and protect the public is being forced to serve and protect themselves.
Maybe we should go
And
watch
make
the Trump
no
rally
mistake,
with the millions of
the
people.
fault
That's pretty awesome, actually. I was
of
listening on my way
any
here.
unrest that rises against the establishment will be at the hands of the police. Final thoughts from the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act. The definition of emergency is what the police have allowed to actually happen. We are now in an emergency due to the declared emergency. Emergency means a situation or an impending situation that constitutes a danger of major proportions that could result in serious harm to persons or substantial damage to property, and that is caused by the forces of nature, a disease, or other health risk, an accident or an act, whether intentional or otherwise. Let this be clear to police. Section 7.0.1 bracket 3.1 of the I and I2 and I3 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act was not demonstrably justified. All measures were not in a manner that was subject to the Charter, and it was your duty to safeguard, and you did not. The declaration of emergency were very likely a simulation and training exercise. The Global Preparedness and Monitoring Board has stated the following progress indicators by September 2020 as follows. The United Nations, including the World Health Organization, conducts at least 2 system-wide training and simulation exercises, including one for covering the deliberate release of a lethal respiratory pathogen. A deliberate release.
They're 100%
this was an intentional act.
So you guys should go look at the police stand on
violates
guard for the I believe there's a page.
law.
There's over
That
8,000
is a
followers now.
biological act of war.
And they are Canadian RCMP, OPP, civilian police, retired and active, that are standing up
Police
together
officers have
against
stated,
what's
I'd love to speak out, but I cannot, and I'd lose my job. You will not lose your job. Stand with your people, and mark my words, we will stand with you.
Exactly. Same. We were fully on Back the Blue the whole way through this whole 10 months. We've been Back the Blue. And we've made it known at every protest.
I'm going to introduce ER. He's going to carry on because my voice is a little sore, guys. Thank you.
I am speaking to the police. My reason for being here is to safeguard the fundamental rights and freedoms in the Human Rights Code. I'm speaking to the police. My reason for being here is to safeguard the fundamental rights and freedoms in the Human Rights Code. It's also your duty under Section 1.2 of the Police Services Act. I'm asking the police
got
to
your phone in
lawfully
my
take
pocket.
into custody the Lieutenant Governor and the Premier of Ontario
Good job.
for hoax regarding terrorism, Section 83.231 bracket 1 of the Canadian Criminal Code. I'm also accusing the Lieutenant Governor and Premier of domestic terrorism, Section 83.01 bracket 1 bracket B of the Canadian Criminal
What?
Code.
Oh, I've got
And
full
because
live,
it's
yeah.
terrorism, and because there is a death, and the death is suicide,
a couple
at
trolls
least
that just
one
literally laugh,
suicide,
laugh, laugh,
it
like the whole
becomes
time.
life in prison
But they're gone. I
for the Lieutenant Governor and Premier. I'm asking the police
It
to
was 29
participate in
today. Oh,
prosecutions against the Lieutenant Governor and Premier, to put the Lieutenant Governor and Premier in prison for life. As well, I'm asking the
Treason,
police
crimes
to
against
lawfully take
humanity.
into custody the Lieutenant Governor and Premier
Yeah. Yeah.
for failing to protect the right to the gaining of a livelihood. Section
you guys
6,
share this to Kelly's wall?
2B of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's disobeying a statute, Section 126 of the Canadian Criminal Code. The Lieutenant Governor and Premier did violate Section 126 of the Canadian Criminal Code. And they did it in numerous ways, not just in the right to the gaining of a livelihood, failing to protect that, but they also failed to uphold Section 7.0.2 bracket 1 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, which states the purpose of making orders in this section in a manner that is subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It also states in times of declared emergency. The purpose of the orders in times of declared emergencies. The emergency ended July 24. The Reopening Act
You listening in there?
started July 21. The emergency ended July 24. All emergency orders under the Reopening Act only had a life from July 21 to July 24. Everything after that served no purpose for those orders. Because in Section 7.0.2 bracket 1, the purpose of making orders in times of a declared emergency. In times of declared emergency. There is no declared emergency. So police, I'm asking you to lawfully take into custody the Lieutenant Governor and Premier for violating Section 126 of the Canadian Criminal Code, violating the Charter, and violating Section 7.0.2 bracket 1 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. I'm also asking the police to lawfully take into custody the Lieutenant Governor and Premier for not protecting children from breathing in carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a known toxic substance. It's a violation of Section 245 of the Canadian Criminal Code. I accuse the Lieutenant Governor and Premier of violating Section 245 of the Canadian Criminal Code. And I ask the police to lawfully take into custody the Lieutenant Governor and Premier. Now, this might be a tall task for a police officer. However, my reason for being here is to safeguard the fundamental rights and freedoms in the Human Rights Code. And I'm here to help you safeguard the fundamental rights and freedoms in the Human Rights Code. And my help for you is to use Section 15 of the Charter, equal benefit and equal protection of the law. You can use equal benefit and equal protection of the law to lawfully take into custody the Lieutenant Governor and Premier and charge them with hoax regarding terrorism. And I'm holding a picture. The top picture here is a picture of hospital staff dancing. They're dancing with probably a fake dead body in a body bag with COVID-19 written at the dead body's feet.
That is such a
If that
fucking
was a
joke.
real live human being, that would be Section 182 Criminal Code violation, indignity to a dead body. However,
Waterloo,
it could be a
Cambridge,
fake body.
Police
The
headquarters.
other pictures here are hospital staff dancing. They've had lots of time to coordinate and practice their moves and practice their steps. The hospitals are not a war zone. thereby making this a hoax. Even the finance minister of Ontario was away at St. Bart's.
Oh fuck. There's like
An Alberta minister
10 of them.
was in Hawaii. It's accused that Justin Trudeau was in the Bahamas. Regardless, those people don't believe that this is serious.
No.
It's therefore a hoax.
They're
And I'm
traveling
again
everywhere.
asking the
They're
police
not
to lawfully
concerned.
take into custody the Lieutenant Governor and Premier for hoax regarding terrorism. Section 83.231, bracket 1, and because there's a death, life in prison.
Thank you, ER. In order to ensure that our police act on our behalf and honor their oath, we are going to be serving them also with this document, making members of this department and the Lieutenant Governor, the Premier, and all responsible bodies liable for $5 million each personally, should they choose not to fulfill their duties that they are obligated to by law. So I'm going to take a few people with me right now into the police station, and we're going to serve this department.
Holy shit, it's cold. It's probably locked as my head. There we go.
Very good.
Thank
Will
you.
you lawfully take into custody the Lieutenant Governor and Premier for hoax regarding terrorism?
Let him read it.
Please read it. Appreciate you guys.
Kelly, you just